Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Should you wish to download the PDF of this session, that shall be available on my Telegram channel. The link to join that channel is provided in the video description. And before we start, an important announcement for all of you. If you have just started your IAS preparation, or you wish to start your IAS preparation in the next few days or weeks, then there is an important class, a free class scheduled for tomorrow, where I will be discussing what to study, what not to study, how to study. Basically, if you have to plan your IAS preparation from zero. The link to register for this special session is provided in the comment section. Please register, and I'll see you tomorrow, 9 p.m. live on Unacademy website and the app. Let's get started and let's look at topic number 1. Lok Sabha passes Waqf Bill. Now, before we start, an important take. There was a lot of criticism because of the way in which the Indian Parliament was functioning, primarily during the last Lok Sabha, which is the 17th Lok Sabha. What was the criticism? The criticism was that Parliament is not an institution for debate and discussion. The bills are getting passed without debate. The bills are not being referred to standing committees. There is no public consultation happening on the bills. These were more or less the criticisms of the Indian Parliament. And now those criticisms have been placed at rest because of this bill. Why? Because for this particular bill, this bill was referred to the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Consultations took place with a massive number of stakeholders. Now, the report of the JPC was presented to the Parliament. There was a massive debate on this bill yesterday. After more than 10 hours of debate, the bill was passed by the Lok Sabha. Also, there used to be a criticism that bills are being passed by the voice vote. That criticism also has been placed at rest because on this particular bill, there was a voting by division as well. So all the standard parliamentary practices were followed in passing this bill, and for this very reason, we should celebrate Indian democracy. Now, whether this bill is good, bad, ugly, we will discuss. Over the next few days and even weeks, there will be lots and lots of articles, editorials, and columns written on this particular piece of legislation. We will discuss all of them one by one. But for this particular reason, that on this bill, there was a wider consultation, there was a JPC constituted, there was a division by vote, and ultimately, after a lot of debate, where everybody participated, this bill should be celebrated as the celebration of Indian Parliament's authority. Now, what is this Waqf? If you look at Muslims, for example, charity plays a very important role, and it's an important element of their faith. For Muslims, it is mandated that 2.5% of your savings every year, every lunar calendar, you have to give out in charity for those who are downtrodden, weaker sections of the society, needy. And that is what we call zakat. Now, you may have property, you may have money, you may have buildings, you may have land. What if instead of giving it to the needy directly, you give it to God? And that is what we call Waqf. So Waqf is primarily a term where wealthy individuals, they donate their buildings, their land, their property or money, and instead of dedicating this directly to the needy, they give it to God, Allah. So that is what we call Waqf. But there are three important elements of Waqf. One is that if I have donated this property, I extinguish my right over this property. That means now this is no longer my property because I have dedicated it to God. Now God becomes the owner of this property. And whatever money is generated from this property, should be used for the benefit of mankind, particularly should be used for the benefit of the Muslim community. Whether this money can be used for constructing hospitals, schools, educational institutions, dispensaries, or giving it for the needy and the downtrodden and the weaker sections of the society, but this money, this property must be used for the benefit of mankind. This is what we call waqf. But there are different types of waqf. One is public, the other is private. What is public waqf? I have donated this money to God, and now whatever money is being generated from this property will be used for the betterment of the mankind. That's public waqf. Then there is something called private waqf. Waqf alal aulad. What does that mean? For example, I have 10 properties. I am a wealthy individual, I have 10 properties. I waqf this, I dedicate this to God, but I will also say that a part of this money should be used for my children as well, for my descendants as well, and the remaining part should be used for the benefit of mankind. That is what we call waqf alal aulad, which means it's a private waqf. A part of this money will be used for the betterment, for the benefit of my descendants. A part of it will be used for the larger society, the needy, the downtrodden. But what if the last descendant, he or she has expired, dead? Now this private waqf will be converted into a public waqf. So what is waqf? We know that. What are the different types of waqf? One is the public waqf. That means I have dedicated this property and will be used for only the needy. Then there is private waqf. I have dedicated this property to God, but a part of this money, part of this belonging should be used for my descendants, and a part of it should be used for the mankind. And once the last descendant is expired, then this private waqf will be converted into a public waqf. Then there is something else called waqf by user, which primarily means that if there are 5-10 buildings or a parcel of land or some property, but over a period of time this has been used as if it is a waqf property, as if somebody has donated this property to God, although there is no formal agreement, although there is no oral agreement, but by the usage of this property for a long period of time, when this property is used for the benefit of the Muslim community, we say by usage, it is the property which is donated, dedicated to God, it becomes waqf by user. That means waqf by user refers to a property that is treated as waqf, but based on its long-term use. And whether you use it for religious purposes or you use it for charitable purposes, doesn't matter, this is waqf by user. So now there is a private waqf, there is a public waqf, and there is waqf by user. This waqf by user, as I told you, based on its long-term usage. And once you have dedicated this property to God, it cannot be sold to someone else. It cannot be inherited by someone else, because the owner of this property, he has now extinguished his rights, his claims over this property, and now the owner of this property is the God. So this property, which is designated as waqf, is non-transferable. It cannot be sold. It cannot be inherited either. That is what you need to know regarding waqf. But now, let's look at some of the important details regarding this waqf. Over a period of time, the amount of property that is treated as waqf, it has expanded. According to a survey conducted by the Ministry of Minority Affairs, and this has been published by India Today Group, the waqf property or the areas, the property, the buildings which are claimed by waqf in India, they are larger than at least 30 sovereign nations. That means the amount of land, property, buildings that today we deem as waqf, it is more than the total land of Mauritius, St. Lucia, Malta, Bahrain, so on and so forth. So this property has expanded over a period of time. When it comes to this waqf property, as I told you, you can use the proceeds from this property for religious purposes, for charitable purposes. But who can make laws on charitable and religious institutions? These charitable and religious institutions, they come under concurrent list, which is list 3 of the Schedule 7 of the Constitution, which means both Parliament as well as state legislatures, they have the right to make a law on charitable and religious institutions. What is the evolution of this Waqf property or Waqf system in India? It started off during the Delhi Sultanate rule, it continued during the Mughal rule as well, it continued during the British period as well. And then various laws were passed, for example, in 1913, in 1923, in 1954, and I will tell you what is the difference between these three laws. But currently existing, we have the Waqf Act of 1995, which regulates the Waqf property in India. This law of 1995 was amended in the year 2013. So what was the need to bring in a further amendment in 2025? Although this bill was introduced in the Parliament in August 2024, then as I told you, this bill was referred to the Joint Parliamentary Committee of both houses of the Indian Parliament. Various stakeholders were consulted, and ultimately the report of the JPC was presented before the Parliament. And then now the Lok Sabha has passed this bill, after which Rajya Sabha will pass this bill. Then this bill will be sent for the President for assent, and then this law will become the law of the land. It will become the act. So as of now, we have the Waqf Act of 1995, which regulates this matter. But prior to that, we had the law of 1913, 1923, and 1954. What is the purpose? How can you create Waqf in India? It can be either through oral or written deed. For example, orally, I am dedicating my property to God, or through a written deed. In a written declaration, I am dedicating Waqf my property to God. That's through oral or written deed. Or it can be through long-term use, as I told you, Waqf by user. Although nobody has formally given this land to God, but since this property has been used like a Waqf property for a long period of time, Waqf by user means this property also belongs to the Waqf. Or endowment upon the end of its succession. For example, Waqf alal Aulad, as I told you, where a part of this proceeds will be given to the descendants of the Waqif as well, somebody who's dedicating this property. But once the last individual, last descendant expires, this property will be converted into a Waqf, public Waqf. Who creates this Waqf? Waqif, which means I am dedicating this property to God, so I am the Waqif. But who will manage this property? Who will manage this establishment? Who will manage these buildings? That individual is known as a mutawakkili. Clear? As of September 2024, we have in India 8.7 lakh registered immovable Waqf properties. For example, in the form of land, in the form of buildings, immovable property. According to the Standing Committee of Social Justice and Empowerment, this committee report of 2014, most states have not completed the survey of Waqf property because land, buildings, these are within the domain of the states. So states had to conduct a survey to identify which of this land or property or a building belongs to the Waqf. Most states have not completed that survey. According to Ministry of Minority Affairs, India has the largest Waqf holding in the world. The slide I was showing you, that the amount of property land that is within the Waqf in India, it is more than at least 30 sovereign countries of the world. Such a committee report, which was set up for looking into the problems of the Muslim community, why are they backward? Because this report said that they are more backward even than the scheduled castes. According to such a committee report headed by Justice Sachar, in 2006, Justice Sachar committee said that the market value of these Waqf property is 1.2 lakh crore. Even then there is a problem. And what is the problem? Over a period of time, what we have seen, that large number of these registered immovable Waqf properties, they have been encroached. Some of them are under litigation. That means there is a dispute whether it's a Waqf property or not. And the status of 50% is unknown. That means the management of the Waqf property is abysmal. over a period of time, various committees have been constituted. And these committees have basically examined the state of Waqf properties in India, the problems. Problem number one is unrealized revenue potential. And here the basic root cause is with the mutawakkil, somebody who manages this Waqf property. There is corruption. Corruption in the sense, this is a building for which rent is to be paid. And this rent will be used for the benefit of the mankind, benefit of the Muslim community. But most of these properties, the rent is 50 rupees per year, 100 rupees per year, although the rent could have been in lakhs. But these mutawakkilis, they are corrupt. Most of them are corrupt. And they utilize this money not for mankind, but for themselves. Some of them have also converted this Waqf property into their private property. So there is a massive mismanagement of these Waqf properties in India, which basically means that the potential revenue of 1.2 lakh crore, which was suggested by Justice Sachar committee report, we have not realized that potential. That's the problem. Problem number two is encroachment. There are private individuals who encroach upon Waqf land and convert that into their own property. So there is encroachment. Poor maintenance. These Waqf properties also are in the form of dargahs, in the form of mosques, in the form of graveyards. And they are poorly managed as well. Their infrastructure is crumbling day by day. So they are not being maintained properly. Now, if there is a dispute as to whether this is a Waqf property or not, I am claiming that this is my property. Waqf claims that this is the Waqf property. If there is a dispute, normally this dispute goes to a tribunal, Waqf tribunal. And there are cases pending in the tribunal as well. That is another problem. And lack of transparency and efficiency in conducting surveys. There have also been allegations that villages after villages have been dedicated as Waqf property. The minister is claiming that at one point in time, Parliament was claimed as a Waqf property. Because once you have claimed a property as Waqf, it is not the judiciary, it is not the state, it is the Waqf tribunal which gets to decide. It's the Waqf board which gets to decide whether this is our property or this is the government property. The allegation also has been that even the government property, government land and buildings have been viewed as Waqf property, which means Waqf by user. That means by usage over a period of time, since you have used this property as Waqf, it will be a Waqf property. Then, sir, you said that 1913 there was a law, 1923 there was a law, 1954 there was a law, 1995 there was a law, 2013 there was an amendment. Now there is a law which is being brought about in 2025. What is the difference? The difference is in 1913, this law validated Waqf deed. That means once you have dedicated this land or property or a building to God, we will validate this saying, yes, this is a Waqf property. In 1923, it was made mandatory that you have to register this Waqf property. You can't simply say that this is a Waqf property without registering it as the Waqf property. So registration becomes a must. That was done in 1923. But then these laws were kept aside. A law was passed in 1954. And what this 1954 law did, it created a central Waqf council. And in every state, we will have a state Waqf board. Why? Because to manage all these properties effectively, to manage and have an oversight over these Waqf properties so that we can streamline the Waqf property and realize their potential, the revenue generating potential, which can be used for the benefit of the Muslim community. For that, Central Waqf Council was created and then state Waqf boards were created. But even then, there was massive mismanagement. In fact, during the colonial period, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had recommended that we need to overhaul the system. Various Muslim leaders over a period of time have said that there is a massive corruption in the Waqf boards. Whether it is the state Waqf boards or central Waqf council, they are not working effectively. And hence, we need a better law. And that was tried to be done in 2013. How? In 1995, tribunals got added. Tribunals in the sense, if there is a Waqf related dispute, whether this is a Waqf property or this is someone else's private property, If there is a dispute, this dispute you can't file in a normal court, regular court. You have to approach the tribunal. And then in these Waqf boards, only Muslims were admitted as members. And those Muslims who had scholarly opinions, who were the scholars of Islamic theology, they were also nominated to these Waqf boards. So there would be election to Waqf board members as well. There will be nominated members as well. And nominated members will be from those who will have knowledge of Islamic law, basically the Sharia. So this was entirely dominated and controlled by the Muslims. So there was no oversight of the state. And when there is a problem in the form of that there is a dispute as to whether this is a Waqf property or not, state is not involved. There has to be a state oversight. There have been issues where government land, government property has been declared as a Waqf, where the state has no involvement whatsoever. All these merit involvement and enactment of a better law to smoothen this entire process and to ensure that there is no corruption in the system. Hence, there was a need to bring in a law. But when we look at this law, this bill, which has been passed by the Lok Sabha, it says now if a Muslim has to dedicate his land or property to Waqf, to God, this individual must have been practicing Islam for 5 years. This ensures that there is no misuse of this provision. Misuse in the sense, do we not talk about cooling off period? That once Chief Election Commissioner resigns, he should be ineligible to apply for a government job, or he should be ineligible for a further employment under the state, or he should be ineligible to join a political party, or judges after retirement, they should not be able to join a political party or contest elections. We call off for a cooling off period. This is to prevent the misuse, because we have seen misuse. Similarly, can it also not be misused that I want to dedicate my property to Waqf, and for that I am converting from one religion to another religion, to Islam, and then dedicating my property? To prevent the misuse of this provision, the bill mandates that if you want to dedicate property to God, you must be practicing Islam for the last 5 years. Only after that you can dedicate your property to God. That's number one. Number two, it removes Waqf by user. Waqf by user in the sense, if there is a land, building, property, which consistently, because of how it was used over a period of time, has now been designated as a Waqf property, this Waqf by user is removed. But only if this is a government property or a government land. If there is a dispute as to whether this land or property is Waqf by user, but this land or property is the government property, only in that case Waqf by user will be eliminated. Otherwise, Waqf by user continues. Similarly, what if I am donating my property to God, but I am not giving this property as inheritance to my daughter because she is also entitled to this property? So I am extinguishing the girl child's right over my property by giving my entire property to God. This cannot happen, because by giving out this property, by donating your property, you can also not disinherit your female heirs. This is what many people argue. These are progressive things about this bill. Importantly, under the 1995 Act, who can survey whether this is a Waqf property or not, Waqf land or not, Waqf building or not? A survey commissioner who will conduct an inquiry whether this is a Waqf property or not, whether through written deed or an oral communication, this property was dedicated to God. Now the bill says, instead of survey commissioner, we will have the office of the district collector. District collector will conduct the survey to see whether this is the land which is belonging to the Waqf, or this is a government land or a private land. Also, if this property is a government property, it will not continue as a Waqf, even if this was Waqf by user. The collector of this area where this land or building is situated, will have the power to conduct the survey, and then through that survey, if it is deemed that no, this was a government property, we have to update the revenue records as well to ensure that this land is now correctly tagged as the government property, government land, government building, to prevent the misuse of these provisions. But there are some issues as well. Issues in the sense, Limitation Act. For example, I have a property, which is my property, but this property is used by you for a long period of time. When do I approach the courts to claim that this is my property? I have to approach the courts within 12 years. After that, Limitation Act will apply, which means now you can't claim your property back. This Limitation Act was not applicable for the Waqf property. Now it is made applicable. That means even if now this Waqf property has been in use for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, normally the Limitation Act would not have applied to this property. But if this property is a government property, disputed government property, Limitation Act will not apply, which primarily means now you can claim that property as the government property and update the revenue records. But even then, there are some individuals who criticize this bill. Criticize this bill on various grounds. Grounds number one, when it comes to Muslim personal law, which is the Sharia law, for example, despite the fact that we are a secular state, but when it comes to the personal laws related to Muslims, related to Christians, related to Hindus, related to Parsis, in their personal laws, they are governed by their own personal laws. For example, the Hindu Act, the Christian Act, the Parsi Act, the Muslim Personal Law, Shariat Application Act 1937. So if it comes to personal laws, if Shariat law is applicable of 1937, it will apply to Waqf as well. Waqf as well in the sense, if under Article 25, you have the fundamental right to profess, practice and propagate your religion. If you are professing that you are a Muslim, now you are practicing your religion by dedicating and denoting your property to God, it will come under the Muslim Shariat Application Act, because these are the special laws for Muslims. There are secular laws for the remaining charitable trusts. For example, we have Indian Trust Act of 1882. We have the Societies Registration Act of 1860. These are the laws, secular laws, where regardless of your religion, you can establish a trust, you can establish a society. But when it comes to the Muslims and their property and their practices related to the religion, the Shariat application law is applicable. And in these Waqf boards, previously, there was a mandatory provision that only Muslims could be part of it. Now you are saying, because of this bill, that the Central Waqf Council as well as the state Waqf boards, they will have non-Muslim members as well. And if they have non-Muslim members, the allegation is that through this involvement of non-Muslim members into the Central Waqf Council and the state Waqf boards, you are violating the rights of the Muslims under Article 25. Another issue is Article 26 of the Constitution. Article 26 guarantees fundamental right to every religious denomination, that you have a fundamental right to acquire immovable property, to establish a charitable institution, to manage a charitable institution. So if you have the fundamental right to manage your charitable institutions, involvement of non-Muslims in these charitable institutions would violate Article 26 of the Constitution. Although the government has clarified, saying who can donate this property, a Muslim. Who will be the manager of this property, the mutawakkil, will also have to be a Muslim. It is just to oversee the implementation of this law, to ensure that there is no misuse of this law. We have the Central Waqf Council, we have the state Waqf boards, which will have judges, which will have parliamentarians, which will have district collectors, although they are not Muslims, but they are just to oversee. That does not mean the state is snatching the rights and the properties of the Muslim community. So this is a law meant to better smoothen the implementation of this law. This is not a law meant to snatch Muslims of their property and their rights. The critics also say that look at other institutions. For example, in Karnataka, we have Hindu Religious Institutions and Charitable Endowments Act 1997. Because charitable institutions, I told you, comes under concurrent list, which means states also have the power to make laws. Under them, all the members who are part of the board, they have to be Hindus. Who is going to be the CEO of this Karnataka board? This person, even if you are a public servant, you have to be a Hindu. Similarly, in Andhra Pradesh, you have to be a Hindu to be a member of this board. You have to be a Hindu if you are a CEO or a commissioner, even if you are a public official. Similarly, we have Sikh Gurdwaras Act 1925, under which all members of the board are required to be Sikh. Similarly, all members of the executive, even if you are a public servant, you have to be a Sikh. And does it violate Constitution? No. Under Article 16, there is a provision. And what is the provision? The state can mandate that if we have to appoint an individual to a religious body, the requirement can be the individual, the public official to that body must subscribe to the faith of that religious body. Which means for Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam, even if the district collector is appointed to the board, you have to be a Hindu. You can't be you can't be from a different religious community. So involvement of non-Muslim members into Central Waqf Council or the state Waqf boards, it would go against the provisions of Article 16, as well as it goes against how other religious communities are being and their property is being governed. There are also critics who say, look at the Hindu temples in India. There is a campaign, a long-standing campaign launched by Dr. Subramanyam Swamy and others as well. They are saying now is the time to reclaim our Hindu temples from the state control. For example, in Tamil Nadu, the temples are under the control of the state. So the argument is that these temples should be taken away from the control of the state and let the Hindus themselves administer and govern these temples. So on one hand, if you are asking for more control of the religious community itself in managing their property, on the other hand, you are involving non-community members to the Central Waqf Council and the state Waqf boards, which would violate the provisions of the Constitution. But whether it is good, bad, or ugly, you need to understand that every bill will have some advantages, will have some disadvantages. There will be positive criticism, there will be negative criticism. And for the civil services examination, you need to understand all viewpoints. Whether this bill is good for these reasons, whether this bill is bad for these reasons, and what is the reform. This matter will go to the courts. We will have to wait and watch how the courts will look into this law. And then we will have an elaborate discussion. Also, I've told you that for the next few days and even for next few weeks, there will be lots and lots of editorials and columns written on this law, and we will discuss them as well, incorporating their viewpoint into our answer writing sessions. Clear? Okay. Let's look at topic number 2. Speaker cannot be indecisive on pleas over defections, says the Supreme Court. We have 10th schedule of the Constitution. And this 10th schedule of the Constitution, which was enacted in 1985 because of the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act, this is what we call the anti-defection law. Very briefly, what does this anti-defection law mean? If you are a member of a house, Now, the House can be Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Legislative Assembly, Legislative Council, but you belong to a political party. The political party has given you ticket to contest the election, and because of that, you became the member of the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Now, if this member of the House voluntarily resigns from this political party, this member of the House will be disqualified under the provisions of the anti-defection law. And who will disqualify you? This decision is given to the Speaker. And the 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution said that the decision of the Speaker shall be final and binding. Matter went to the court. The year was 1992 in Kyoto Holohan versus Zachilhu. In this case, Supreme Court said, yes, we agree with anti-defection law because the provision says if you are a member of a house belonging to a political party, you voluntarily resigned from your party, you voluntarily give up your membership of the political party, you should be disqualified, and Speaker will take that decision. But the decision of the Speaker cannot be final. Why? Because there has to be judicial review. The final authority has to be the courts, because judicial review is what? It is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. And basic structure of the Constitution is something that you cannot violate. But who will take that decision? Speaker. Speaker is partisan. Why? Although it is not mentioned in the Constitution, but the Speaker always belongs to the ruling political party or the ruling coalition. If this defector is in favor of the ruling political party, Speaker is not acting. If this defector is against the ruling political party, the Speaker acts in a jiffy, quickly, and disqualifies that legislator. So Speaker, because of his actions or her actions, because you belong to the ruling political party, you are partisan in your approach. Which means one problem with this law is that there is no time limit. If the Speaker has to disqualify you, but in how many days, how many months, how many decades, how many millennia, that is not mentioned in the law. And the Speaker is not acting if the defector is in favor of the ruling political party. And this has happened in case of Telangana, where 10 Bharatiya Rashtriya Samiti MLAs, they have defected towards the Congress. And since the Speaker belongs to the ruling political party, which is the Congress, Speaker is not acting at all. Now the matter goes to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is now wondering, if you have defected after 1 year, does that mean for the remaining 4 years, the Speaker will not act? Because then what will be the role of judicial review, which is part of the basic structure of the Constitution? 2014, there was another similar case in the same state, Telangana, where a member of the TDP had joined the TRS. It was TRS then, now it is BRS. And Speaker was not taking any action. Matter went to the court, High Court. High Court said we are helpless. Why are we helpless? Because we have the power of judicial review, which means first Speaker has to take a decision. If the Speaker says, I will not disqualify you, then we can review it. If the Speaker says, I am disqualifying you, then we will review it, whether it is right or wrong, correct, incorrect, legal, illegal, constitutional, unconstitutional. But we are helpless at pre-decisional stage. Before the Speaker takes a decision, we are helpless. Only once the Speaker takes a decision, we can interfere, we can come into the picture, we can use our power of judicial review. But over a period of time, the Supreme Court, what it has done, it has practiced on this matter something called judicial activism. How? There was a case in Manipur where a Congress MLA had joined the BJP and he was made a minister. Mr. T. Shyam Kumar, he was a Congress MLA, had joined the BJP in Manipur, and he was later appointed as the Forests Minister as well. Petition was filed before the Speaker of the Manipur Legislative Assembly that you disqualify T. Shyam Kumar, Speaker is not acting. Matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court initially exercised restraint, was asking the speaker, take a decision. Speaker is not taking a decision. And ultimately, Supreme Court lost itself. And Supreme Court invoked its power under Article 142 of the Constitution, where Supreme Court can give any order so as to give complete justice. And what Supreme Court did? Supreme Court said, T. Shyam Kumar, you are no longer a minister. Why is this judicial activism? Because normally you, me, and others, we could have protested outside the speaker's house or office that you disqualify T. Shyam Kumar. And because of our pressure, the speaker could have disqualified him. But now it is not us who are protesting. It is now Supreme Court taking it upon itself, taking the role of an activist, and is forcing the executive, forcing the authorities to act. And the Supreme Court is saying, T. Shyam Kumar, you are no longer a minister. Although that is not the power of the court. Because who can appoint a minister, governor, on the advice of the chief minister? Who can remove a minister, governor, on the advice of the chief minister? But this time, who is removing the minister? Supreme Court, not on the advice of the chief minister. Because Supreme Court can do anything so as to give complete justice. In that very case, in Manipur case, Supreme Court had asked a very important question. It's time to consider that the speaker, who is acting like a quasi-judicial authority, because the speaker is acting like a judicial body to decide whether you should be disqualified or not. Supreme Court said, Rohinton Fali Nariman was the judge, one of the judges in this case, who said it is time for Parliament to reconsider whether this disqualification power should be given to a speaker who performs this quasi-judicial function, and at the same time he continues to belong to the ruling political party or the ruling coalition. Should we entrust this responsibility to a separate tribunal? But not the speaker, because speaker is acting in a biased manner. And that is how this question was asked in the examination. Should we follow the practice that is followed in UK, for example? Once a speaker, always a speaker. That means once you have been elected as the speaker, you will continue to remain the speaker as long as you decide, as long as you want to resign. And in the next election, even if you have to contest the election, no other political party will set up a candidate against you, so that you can win unopposed from your constituency and then again continue as the speaker. And once you are not dependent upon political parties for ticket, for winning, you will not act in a biased manner. You will not act in a partisan manner. You will be non-partisan, unbiased in your functioning. Once a speaker, always a speaker. Do you think this practice should be adopted to impart objectivity to the office of the speaker? What could be its implications for the robust functioning of parliamentary business in India? And here what the Supreme Court is saying, Justice Gawai is asking a question. Although there is no time limit prescribed by the law within which the speaker has to act on disqualification petitions, what if this defection happened in the first year and the speaker does nothing for the next 4 years? Courts cannot do anything? Will courts sit with their hands tied? So maybe now the court will practice another judicial activism and will prescribe a time limit within which the speaker has to act on these disqualification petitions. So very interesting topic, very important topic, and of utmost relevance for your examination. Clear? Any questions as of now? Okay. Tamil Nadu adopts resolution on retrieval of Katchatheevu. When you look at this word Katchatheevu in Tamil language, it means a barren island. This Katchatheevu is 285-acre uninhabited island. Why is it uninhabited? Primarily because there is no source of drinking water in this island. And one establishment that you can see at Katchatheevu is the St. Anthony's Church. And it is argued that this tiny island, Katchatheevu, it has evolved because of the volcanic eruption in the 14th century. It is also argued that this Katchatheevu was previously part of the Ramnad Zamindari, basically part of Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore at that time. And then Sri Lanka also claimed it. So look at the geographical location. This is where Katchatheevu is. It was previously considered that it was part of Ramnad dynasty, Zamindari, which is part of Tamil Nadu. Sri Lanka said, no, it is our part. Ultimately, what happened? In 1974, India-Sri Lanka agreement took place. Under this agreement, this Katchatheevu was given to Sri Lanka. Why was it given to Sri Lanka? Because at that time, Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. Few years earlier, she had also ceded close to 250 acres of land, arid land, along the run of Kutch to Pakistan. And now she said that what we want cordial relationship with Sri Lanka, because at that time, Sri Lanka was also being courted by China, by North Korea, so as to expand the communist influence. There was USSR and United States who were also trying to expand their maritime influence in this region. So we needed a neighbor whom we can trust. We needed a neighbor with whom we have no dispute whatsoever. And that is how in 1974, this Katchatheevu island was given to Sri Lanka. And in 1976, another agreement was signed where it was told that India and Sri Lanka will not fish in each other's exclusive economic zone. But this Katchatheevu island lies at the periphery of this exclusive economic zone of both the countries. According to this 1974 agreement, where Katchatheevu was given to Sri Lanka, India maintains that even then our fishermen could enter into this island for fishing purposes. And fishing is almost always considered to be controversial between the relations of the two countries, India and Sri Lanka. Indian fishermen entering the Sri Lankan waters. We have previously studied once how the kind of fishing techniques used by Indian fishermen, that is considered to be anti-maritime security by Sri Lanka, and Indian fishermen have been arrested. Indian fishermen have been killed as well in police firings. So this is an important emotional issue. Now Tamil Nadu government for a long period of time is asking for the retrieval of Katchatheevu. In fact, Srimati J. Jayalalitha, when she was the chief minister, she approached the Supreme Court as well and said the government of India could not have given this territory to Sri Lanka. Why? Because there is a case known as Berubari Union, 1960, where Supreme Court had said that if you have to give up a part of your territory to another country, that cannot be done through an executive action. That cannot be done through an executive decision. For that, you need to amend the constitution under Article 368. And only through a constitutional amendment can you gift a part of your territory to another country. This was the petition filed in the court. So how can executive, central government gift a part of its territory to another country without using constitutional amendment? Mukul Rohatgi, he was the Attorney General in 2014. He submitted before the Supreme Court and said, in this particular case, no constitutional amendment was required. Why? Because constitutional amendment is required when you give up your territory to another country. Katchatheevu was not part of India. It was a matter of dispute. whether it is part of Sri Lanka or it is part of India. If it was part of India and we had to give it to Sri Lanka, a constitutional amendment would have been required. But since it was never part of India, we just resolved our dispute with Sri Lanka by saying, okay, Katchatheevu belongs to you, this is yours. So no constitutional amendment act is required. And Mukul Rohatgi further said that since this is not a dispute now between India and Sri Lanka, this is only a dispute between Tamil Nadu and the central government, because Tamil Nadu wants this Katchatheevu to come back to India. So the only way in which we can take Katchatheevu back is if we resort to war. Otherwise, we can't do it. But Katchatheevu is an important emotional issue for Tamil Nadu political parties, primarily because the Tamil fishermen, they enter this area. Sri Lanka says that this 1974 agreement between India and Sri Lanka, it gives certain rights to Indian fishermen, but not to fish. Then to do what? You can come and you can rest at Katchatheevu. You can come and you can pray at the St. Anthony's Church in Katchatheevu. You can dry your fishing nets at Katchatheevu. You can come to Katchatheevu without visa. These are the privileges available to you. But those privileges do not include Indian fishermen going for fishing expeditions around Katchatheevu Island. And for that, we need to understand one more important aspect. Both India and Sri Lanka, they are bound by Vienna Convention on the Law of the Treaties of 1969, according to which neither country can unilaterally retract the agreements. So can India unilaterally come out of this agreement that we had with Sri Lanka in 1974 and say, no, Katchatheevu now belongs to us? You can't do that, because both India as well as Sri Lanka, they are bound by this Vienna Convention. Even then, if India withdraws from this treaty, the other country has to ratify that withdrawal. So without Sri Lanka's agreement, you cannot do that. You cannot withdraw from this treaty itself. Even if there is a dispute between India and Sri Lanka on Katchatheevu now, although central government is silent on this, maximum you can do is you can refer this matter to International Court of Justice. And then whatever International Court of Justice says, that becomes binding on both the countries. So it is through this logic, through this agreement, through this mechanism, you can retrieve Katchatheevu, or you can take Katchatheevu back, or it can be through war. Unilaterally, Indian government cannot do that. What we need on Katchatheevu is a consensus that treaties that we have signed in the past, they have to be abided by in the future. So this rhetoric coming from the Tamil Nadu political parties, primarily for their own political requirements, this should not have an impact on India's relationship with foreign countries. And Sri Lanka is an important neighbor, and we have our philosophy of neighborhood first. Because when this agreement was signed in 1974, although it was a mutual agreement, but it was a beautiful statement from India. Because at that time, India was being accused of being a bully for their smaller neighbors. We said we are not a bully. We can give up our claims for the larger benefit of good relations, mutual relations, better relations between the two countries. And in fact, later on, Gujral doctrine was also implemented, where I.K. Gujral, Inder Kumar Gujral, was the Prime Minister, where we said that in our neighborhood, we have smaller countries. We want to strengthen relationship with the smaller countries, and it should not be based on what they give to us. We should have the magnanimity of giving them more, because we are a big brother. It is in this backdrop that we have to understand that this Katchatheevu rhetoric, it has to come to an end. We have to involve Tamil Nadu political parties so that they also tone down their rhetoric on Katchatheevu. Clear? Now let's look at another column. The ring of fire around Iran is tightening. There was a time, once upon a time, where US and Iran, they shared good, cordial relationship with each other. In fact, in 1957, United States had given Iran its first nuclear reactor. So the first nuclear reactor was given to Iran by United States. In 1967, enriched uranium was also given to Iran by United States. But then this relationship between United States and Iran deteriorated after the Iranian Islamic Revolution of 1979, where the Shah of Iran was deposed and Islamic Revolution was established, successful in Iran. And because of that, Ayatollah Khamenei or Ayatollah Khamenei, he became the supreme leader of Iran, a religious institution. Although there are elections, but real power, extreme power, ultimate power is with the spiritual leader of Iran, Ayatollah. What we need to understand is that uranium the naturally occurring uranium that we have, it is uranium-238. This naturally occurring uranium-238, it has 0.7% of uranium-235. What is this uranium-235? It is this isotope of uranium which is capable of sustaining nuclear chain reaction. The naturally occurring uranium that we have is uranium-238. It has 0.7% of uranium-235 isotope, and it is this uranium-235 which is capable of sustaining nuclear chain reaction, which can be used for manufacturing a nuclear bomb. So what we need to do for this uranium-238, we need to do something called enrichment. We need to enrich it so that we can enhance the concentration of uranium-235. And how do we do it? We use centrifuges. Centrifuges are basically very fast spinning machines. And in these very fast moving spinning machines, you try to separate this light uranium-235 from the heavier uranium-238. So what you need centrifuges, you need to enrich uranium. And if you enrich uranium up to 5% of uranium-235, this enriched 5% uranium will be used for nuclear power plants. But if you enrich uranium up to 90%, this you can use for manufacturing weapons. This you can use for manufacturing weapons. For a long time, Iran has been accused of trying to manufacture a nuclear weapon, which is not acceptable to various countries. Various countries, predominantly, for example, Saudi Arabia. Countries such as Israel. Why not Saudi Arabia? Because of the Shia-Sunni rivalry. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni-dominated country. Iran is a Shia-dominated country. And Shias and Sunnis, Saudi Arabia and Iran, they are in conflict with each other. So if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, it is going to threaten Saudi Arabia as well and other Sunni powers in the region as well, and will establish Iran as a superpower in that region. Similarly, it is not acceptable to Israel as well. What is Israel's nuclear policy? There are some countries which have declared openly that we have a nuclear weapon. For example, we have declared that we have a nuclear weapon. Pakistan has done that. China has done that. United States has done that. Russia has done that. Israel's nuclear policy is ambivalent. It neither accepts that they have a nuclear weapon, nor does it reject, saying, no, we don't have a nuclear weapon. it is silent in answering this question. But the world knows that Israel has a nuclear weapon. And if Israel is one country, the only country in the Middle East which has a nuclear weapon, and that's how it is exercising control in this region, imagine if another country, Iran, also possesses a nuclear weapon. It will disturb the power equation in this region. That is why these are the countries which do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, apart from various other countries who principally believe that we should go for disarmament. There is no place for nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction in this world. They believe in disarmament. Norway, for example, Sweden, for example, Scandinavian countries, for example. But Iran has long been viewed as part of axis of evil. Apart from Iraq, apart from North Korea and Iran. Axis of evil, for example, in 2011, when September 11 attacks took place, where the planes were hijacked by Al-Qaeda and 2 planes hit the World Trade Towers in United States. One plane hit one side of the Pentagon, which is the defense establishment of United States. And another plane, it was moving closer to White House, to target White House, but it was shot down near Pennsylvania. The biggest terror attacks on the American soil. After that, George W. Bush, he launched his war on terror. And he coined this term called axis of evil. That Iraq, North Korea, and Iran, these are the axes of evil in the world. And we have to do something about them. We have to launch a war on terror against them. And that is how United States first launched a war in Afghanistan and removed Taliban, because Taliban was accused of sheltering Osama bin Laden. And then war was launched against Iraq as well, because Iraq was accused of manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. And on North Korea, there have always been sanctions. And because Iran was accused of developing nuclear weapon, sanctions were imposed on Iran as well. Major sanctions. And it crippled their economy. Ultimately, what happened? There was a treaty. Treaty called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, known as Iranian Nuclear Deal, which was signed between United States, Iran. 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council were participating. 5 permanent members, US, UK, France, Russia, China. Germany also participated. That is why we call it P5+1. 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany, Iran, European Union also participated. Ultimately, what happened? Because of this joint comprehensive plan of action, because of this Iranian nuclear deal, Iran gave up its claim and said, we will not manufacture nuclear weapons. And in fact, the nuclear reactors that we have, whether it is at Arak, whether it is at Fordo, whether it is at Natanz, we will use these reactors only for civilian purposes, for research purposes, for nuclear power generation. We won't use it for manufacturing a nuclear bomb. And in exchange of that, IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, will review periodically, will visit and inspect these nuclear reactors to see whether Iran is complying with these terms and conditions or not. And in return, some of the sanctions slowly and steadily will be removed, revoked from Iran, so that Iran can also develop itself. Even then, this deal was criticized by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia says we should have been consulted. This deal was criticized by Israel. Israel said, no, this does not mean that Iran cannot make a nuclear weapon. You are only delaying the inevitable. Those who were the proponents of this policy, of this agreement, they said, without this agreement, Iran could have manufactured and tested a nuclear weapon in few months. Now, because of this deal, it will take them a year. So what is the difference? The difference is, if it is going to take them a year, that time can be used by the world powers to impose further sanctions on Iran or to impose a war on Iran. Right now, they are within months of testing a nuclear weapon. Now, because of this deal, they will take a year, because they will have to dismantle the centrifuges which will be responsible for enriching the uranium to make it weapons grade up to 90% enrichment. But then in 2016, when this was implemented, although this Iranian nuclear deal was announced in 2015, but in 2016 it was implemented. But in 2018, when Donald Trump was the president of the United States, he withdrew unilaterally from this Iranian nuclear deal. He said, no, we will further impose the sanctions because I'm not in agreement with this deal. Now, what Donald Trump has done, March 7, last month, he announced that he has written a letter to the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah. Let's have talks on this nuclear deal again. That is one aspect that you have to keep in mind. On the other hand, you have to also look at something else which is mentioned in this article. What is mentioned is that October 7, 2023, the terrorists from Hamas, from Gaza in Palestine, they crossed the Gaza-Israeli border, took Israeli citizens, civilians, hostages, including women and children, and this led to a full-blown war in Gaza, launched by Israel. Although there was a temporary truce as well, ceasefire as well, but now more bombings are taking place by Israel on Gaza. And through that, what you want to do, Israel wants to decimate Hamas. And Hamas gets its support from Iran. Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. These are the three non-state actors in Middle East who are getting support from Iran. And the only state entity which was supporting Iran or which would get the support of Iran used to be Syria under President Bashar al-Assad. But Bashar al-Assad, he was overthrown. Coup took place. Bashar al-Assad fled to Russia. So this Syrian regime fell. Now the only state entity which was supporting Iran, Syria, it has gone. Attacks are being launched against Hamas by Israel. United States is launching attacks on Houthis because Houthis would control and block the Red Sea. This is the question which was asked in your last prelims examination as well. Now, because of this reason, this article says that United States is now decidedly favoring Israel. Because previously Joe Biden was also favoring Israel, but even then there was some limit. Even then there was some persuasion that Israel should not go out with an all-out war in this region. But Donald Trump's policy towards Israel is crystal clear. We support them fully. In fact, Jerusalem, when it was declared as the capital of Israel, United States was the first to recognize Jerusalem as the state capital of Israel. And there are critics who argue that this problem in the Middle East right now may lead to a full-fledged war, but not between Hamas and Israel, but between Israel and Iran, which will have ramifications for the entire world. But what are the two options that Israel would have in this region? One option is Israel will launch strike at Iran's nuclear facilities, whether it is Natanz, Arak, Fordo, launch attacks on these facilities so that Iran is not able to develop a nuclear weapon. But there is a challenge there as well. The challenge is that a large number of these nuclear reactors, the centrifuges where they are present, they are located beneath the ground. They are located under the mountains as well. So it is not possible, according to this article, for Israel and United States to completely demolish the nuclear infrastructure of Iran. On the other hand, what is then the other alternative? The other alternative is to launch an all-out war, direct war, just like you launched an all-out war against Iraq. But this article says Iran is not like Iraq, because Iran has military of a better strength, it has navy of a better strength, and Iran, it controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very vital oil choke point. And in fact, you can't do something like Syria in the form of regime change. Because if Israel and United States have one option, which is to dismantle the nuclear capabilities of Iran, you can't do that 100%. Why? Because there are nuclear facilities which are under the mountains, under the ground. So you can't completely demolish them. Number one option. Number two option, you can launch an all-out war, just like you did in Iraq. But you can't do that as well 100% accurately, because Iran is not like Iraq. Third, what you can do is maybe you can go for regime change. You can fund the separatists, the dissidents in Iran, so that they can go for a revolution and overthrow Ayatollah and the government in Iran. This article says even that looks unlikely, because unlike other countries in West Asia, where there is a simmering discontent, where people are not happy, may not be happy, and they want to effect a regime change. For example, because of the Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia and then engulfed almost the entire region, where because of that there was regime change in Libya, there was a regime change in Egypt, there was regime change in various other places. And some critics say that United States used to fund and support Arab Spring. But you can't do that in Iran, because in Iran, they have ideologically stronger people in Iran who are ideologically committed for their Islamic revolution. Although there is discontent, there are people who are not happy with the Ayatollah or not happy with the Islamic regime. But even then, it is not of that massive scale that you can effect a regime change. And if you go for an all-out war, what will Donald Trump tell his countrymen? Because his policy has been, we should come out of these wars. United States should not be misusing or spending its money to fight other people's war or other countries' war. So United States wants to come out of these forever wars mindset. Then how will United States react to Donald Trump entering into a full-fledged war on the side of Israel on Iran? This is something very, very important for your geopolitics, for your international relations, and I hope this has been crystal clear. Any questions on this topic? Okay, done. Timing and location. India and Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you would know, it was previously part of Pakistan, called East Pakistan. The country was partitioned on the grounds of religion. But even this religion as a glue could not bind the two Pakistans together, East and West Pakistan. And East Pakistan rebelled, retaliated, launched a war, and liberated itself. And that East Pakistan became Bangladesh. And India played a very important role in the emergence and the independence of Bangladesh, and establishment of Bangladesh as an independent sovereign country on the world map. In fact, its tallest leader, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he appreciated India's help. But then Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. And at that time, his daughter, Sheikh Hasina, she had taken shelter in India. So India's relationship with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's family was rock solid. In fact, there was a time when in our neighborhood, we were facing a lot of challenges. For example, China was encroaching its influence and was trying to exert its influence over China, over Myanmar, over Nepal, over Maldives, over various other countries in this neighborhood. There was one shining spot in our foreign policy, and that used to be Bangladesh, when Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister. The relationship between India and Bangladesh was rock solid, steady. In fact, a large number of terrorists who were causing problems in Northeast, they were extradited by Bangladesh to India. But then you would know that Sheikh Hasina was overthrown in a coup, which happened because of the Bangladeshi army, which happened because of the student protests. And now Sheikh Hasina is again in exile in India, taking shelter in India. And in absence of Sheikh Hasina, instead what we have Muhammad Yunus, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, who is now the interim head of the Bangladeshi government. And he is now speaking in a completely anti-India tone. After Sheikh Hasina, her government collapsed, we have seen violence against the minorities in Bangladesh, which didn't used to happen when Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister. The temples have been burnt, minorities have been attacked, their land has been confiscated. And now what Muhammad Yunus has done, he has spoken of something dangerous. What he said, look at this chicken neck, which is a tiny corridor in Siliguri district in West Bengal. And it is this chicken neck which connects the mainland India to Northeast. Muhammad Yunus says, this Northeast, which includes 7 sisters, he says it is landlocked. And he basically asked China to please come and invest in this region. And the gateway to this region is through Bangladesh. And he says that China should treat Bangladesh as the entry point to this 7 sisters, including then Bhutan and Nepal as well. So you should invest more in this region. This is like Bangladesh planning cutting off this chicken neck and cutting off Northeast from the mainland India. And China has been long eyeing for this region, because China even today claims that Arunachal Pradesh is not part of India, it is part of China. There was a time in 2017 when Doklam took place, where Chinese military was constructing activities in Doklam in Bhutan area. This is where India entered this area, stopped this tussle. This tri-junction, Doklam, between India, Bhutan, and China. That is what this editorial says, that Yunus chose the wrong time and place to push for regional connectivity, because Muhammad Yunus is in China to meet the communist leadership in China. There, he is making such a controversial statement regarding China investing in this region and calling Bangladesh as the gateway to these 7 sisters. There is going to be a meeting of BIMSTEC, where in all likelihood, whether it will happen or not, Prime Minister and Muhammad Yunus may meet. Although recently what we saw, President Draupadi Murmu, she sent Eid greetings to Muhammad Yunus. Prime Minister also wrote a letter to Muhammad Yunus on the Liberation Day of Bangladesh. But the direct talks between Muhammad Yunus and India have not been taking place. And India has not even invited Muhammad Yunus to India. So this is an important matter of national importance for India, and that is why the activities of this interim government in Bangladesh, they have to be checked. Let's look at the mains-based question, discuss the key areas of cooperation and challenges in India-Bangladesh relations, how can both countries further strengthen their bilateral areas? Let's look at another article. Third language choice, Hindi in non-Hindi states, Sanskrit in the Hindi belt. New national education policy, although there was a policy of the 1968, now there is a policy of new national education policy of 2020. Three language formula. And what is this three language formula? If it is northern India, and if it is southern India, southern India should teach three languages to its kids. One would be their local language, the second would be English, and third should be Hindi. This was according to the previous three language formula. And in North India, Hindi should be taught, English should be taught, and preferably a South Indian language should be taught. Whether we are following this three language formula or not, we don't have the exact data, the current data. What we have the old data, All India School Education Survey data of 2009, which is not public, but Hindu says we have extracted it from sources. And then we have an old data related to 1990s, according to which there are 27 states which have implemented the three language formula. Tamil Nadu has not, Puducherry has not, Jammu and Kashmir has not. The new national education policy says not Hindi. These South Indian states, they can choose and teach local language, then English, then any South Indian language. So it does not have to be necessarily Hindi. But Tamil Nadu is protesting and saying, no, this is not three language formula. This is the imposition of Hindi on the unwilling population of South India, particularly Tamil Nadu. And that is why we should not follow the three language formula. We will only follow the two language formula. We will teach Tamil and we will teach English. The central government says, we are not forcing you to teach Hindi. We are asking you to teach any third language. But according to this data, even if Hindi is not imposed, Hindi becomes the default third language to be chosen in South India. Why? Because of the demand and supply. There is no demand for other languages. There is no supply of enough teachers in other languages other than Hindi. So if you have to implement three language formula, this third language has to be by default Hindi in South India. And in North India, it is Sanskrit. For example, in UP, for example, in Uttarakhand, for example, in Bihar, the third language, which ideally should have been a South Indian language, it has been replaced by Sanskrit according to this data. That's what you have to keep in mind. So if there is a question on the three language formula, even if the new National Education Policy 2020 does not mandate Hindi, but by default it can be Hindi, because there are not enough teachers in other languages, which means there is no good demand for other languages other than Hindi. For example, in Himachal Pradesh, where Tamil used to be taught, because of lack of availability of teachers, there is no enrollment for Telugu, Tamil and French. 71% of Urdu teaching posts are vacant. 34% of Punjabi teachers are vacant. While only 9.8% vacancy is in their Sanskrit teaching posts. So you create the demand by having a large number of teachers in Sanskrit in North India, by having a large number of teachers in Hindi in South India, which means through supply, because there is a supply of Hindi teachers in South India, there is a supply of Sanskrit teachers in North India. You are making Sanskrit as the default third language in North India and Hindi as the default third language in South India. This is according to the survey conducted by the Hindu newspaper. Let's look at two quick topics for your focus prelims. First is BIMSTEC. There is a BIMSTEC summit which is going to take place in Bangkok. What are the facts that you need to know? BIMSTEC stands for the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation. It's basically a regional grouping, regional organization. And this regional organization was established in 1997. What created BIMSTEC was a declaration known as the Bangkok Declaration in 1997. Initially, it was not BIMSTEC. Initially, it was BIMSTEC. Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka and Thailand Economic Cooperation. But then 3 more countries got added. Which are these countries? Myanmar in 1997, Bhutan and Nepal in 2004. So you have to keep in mind that BIMSTEC is a regional organization. It was established in 1997 because of the Bangkok Declaration. Initially, there were 4 members, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Thailand. And later on, 3 more members got added. That means total we have 7 members. When were these members added? For example, Nepal and Bhutan in 2004 and Myanmar in 1997. These facts are important, can be relevant for your prelims examination. Last topic. US man arrested for entering restricted North Sentinel Island. What is that North Sentinel Island? Andaman and Nicobar Island is strategically very important and culturally and linguistically also very important. In this Andaman and Nicobar Islands, what we have seen, there are some tribal groups, for example, Great Andamanese, the Jarawas, the Yonges, Shompen, Nicobaris, and the Sentinelese. These are the tribals who are inhabiting this Andaman and Nicobar group of islands. These Sentinelese, for example, they are also categorized under PVTG, particularly vulnerable tribal group. That means there are tribals, and within the tribals, there are more particularly vulnerable tribal groups called PVTGs. And these North Sentinel Island, in 1956, it was declared as a tribal reserve, and the government of India prohibited that you cannot travel within 5.6 kilometers of this area. How many North Sentinelese are residing there, we don't know, although the government keeps a track, monitors this area, but this is a no-go area, which means outsiders are not allowed because we follow the policy of isolation. We don't interfere with the customs, with the practices, with the way of life of these tribal people. But according to various reports, mostly the number of these tribals is in the range of 50 to 200. Some say it is 35 to 500 as well. And now a US man who had entered this restricted North Sentinelese Island, he has been arrested. Because what are these islands? What is the significance of these islands? Who are these tribals? When this order was issued? What is the spread of this restriction to enter this area? That is something that you have to keep in mind for your prelims examination. With this, we have come to an end to this session of the daily newspaper analysis. If you have liked this session, got benefited from this session, please let me know in the comment section and don't forget to press the like button. And I will see you tomorrow again in the morning with another edition of the newspaper analysis. And if you are a beginner and you want to understand UPSC preparation from zero, then please join me tomorrow for a special class at 9 p.m. on Unacademy app. Thank you for staying with me. All the best. Bye-bye.